Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Northeast States Collaboratives meeting on interregional transmission and the request for information that we've put out. My name is Abe Silverman. I'm a research scholar at Johns Hopkins University, and I facilitate the Northeast States Collaborative. We're delighted to see everyone this morning. I want to also introduce Sue Glatz, who's my partner in running the Northeast States Collaborative, as well as Joe DeLosa from the Brattle Group, who's going to be presenting today. So this webinar is an opportunity really for you all to ask questions about the request for information that the Northeast States Collaborative has put out looking for interregional transmission opportunities. Today's session is recorded, and I want to note that we are not speaking on behalf of any particular state. We are representing the collaborative, and we're the ones running the solicitation, but obviously with the support and cooperation and participation of our state colleagues. So Joe, if you want to go ahead and share the slides, we'll go ahead and get started. Just a couple of housekeeping notes. This is an open webinar, so we're going to ask everyone to stay muted as we go through the presentation, but we will be taking questions, and people can either use the chat or your raise hand feature, and we'll go ahead and open it up for questions as we go. I just want to note that all of our documents available from the RFI, including the RFP associated with that will be coming out of this meeting, will be posted at the website on the Johns Hopkins University Ralph O'Connor Sustainable Energy Institute homepage. You can see the link here, and you won't have any trouble finding it. So Joe, please, next slide. Great, so here's our agenda for today. And really what we're doing, and this is a really exciting initiative, is what we're trying to do is fill a gap that I think a lot of us see in today's interregional transmission planning process. And the goal that we're hoping to come out of this is that we will have robust participation in the RFI, and we'll really focus on identifying what we're calling candidate projects. And these are projects that increase interregional transfer capability between two or more independent system operators in the Northeast. So that's PJM, New York ISO, and ISO New England, that will improve grid reliability, support economic growth, and reduce costs for consumers. You can see that's in the cover letter from the states. That is why we are also committed to making this process work, because we see these potential benefits out there, and we really see the gap that needs to get filled. So we're going to start with a very short introduction to the collaborative, and then we're going to move over to have a short presentation from Mr. DeLosa talking about the strategic action plan that the collaborative has put out. And then we'll move on to some real information about the RFI process, as well as answering a number of questions that we've received. And then we'll open it up for additional questions. All right, Joe, please, next. So just as background, I think many of you know this, but the Northeast States Collaborative was really formed in 2023 when Massachusetts and a number of other states sent a letter to, at that point, Maria Robinson of the Grid Deployment Office, looking for the collaborative between the states and the federal government working on transmission issues with a real focus on how do we fix this broken interregional transmission process that many of us have been watching, now for really the more than 10 years since Order 1000 was passed, and recognizing that it has a lot of warts. So we really have four main missions that we work on within the collaborative. But really today we're talking about number two, which is, this goal of identifying potential multi-state or interregional projects that may be suitable for study and procurement, building off of existing state and DOE analyses, as well as analysis from a number of others that have looked at these issues. We often talk about with the Northeast States Collaborative, we have a bias towards action. We don't want another report. We really want to get something that we can move forward with, and also identifying least regrets options as we move forward. So with that, Joe, I'm going to turn it over to you for a brief introduction into the strategic action plan that really is the genesis for this RFI process.
Great. Thank you so much, Abe, and thank you to the collaborative membership for the opportunity this morning to offer a brief summary of the strategic action plan, and specifically the recommendations and elements related to the RFI that we're discussing today. So in light of the collaborative's goal, as Abe just mentioned, of lowering customer costs while improving reliability, the action plan focused on an integrated set of near and midterm actions, as you can see on the slide. At the highest level, these steps are intended to reduce the barriers to efficient interregional planning and improve the regulatory landscape for future coordinated interregional efforts. The near-term items are intended to be addressed this year, with the midterm items intended to provide a pathway for the collaborative to continue pursuing these efforts over the next several years. I'm certainly delighted that several of the near-term actions are already underway, including the RFI that we're discussing this morning. So today we'll focus on the plan's first recommendation, taking initial steps towards addressing the gaps in interregional planning that Abe mentioned by conducting a state-led RFI to identify candidate projects. So the first thing we'll do is speak a little bit about the current gaps that exist that Abe mentioned. We'll just dive into one more layer of detail. The first short-term action plan item is really motivated by the challenges associated with these transmission planning and coordination efforts between regions, particularly in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic. Over the past few years, these challenges have largely prevented any meaningful interregional transmission from being developed at all. Against this backdrop, though, a large and growing number of studies, including by DOE, NERC, national labs, MIT, and industry, continue to show the significant benefits associated with additional interregional transmission. Given the commonalities in the findings of the various studies, we have estimated in the strategic action plan a series of low regrets interregional transmission needs. That is an amount of increased transfer capability between regions that is commonly shown as beneficial across a wide range of studies. As you look over to the right of this slide, these low regrets needs include 2035 needs of 2 gigawatts between New York and PJM and 1.7 gigawatts between New York and New England. You can also see that these needs could be much larger when accounting for high load and or high decarbonization futures. Notably, though, the low regrets estimates in the high decarbonization scenarios conservatively skew towards the bottom of the range of various study outcomes, given the high degree of uncertainty. One thing we also wanted to highlight, given the scope of the RFI, is that studies have also identified the benefits of a stronger interconnection with Canada, with several studies supporting a low regrets need of 10 gigawatts between Canada and the Northeast by 2050. But even in light of these widely identified needs, prior to the RFI, no process existed for groups of states spanning different transmission planning regions to take the various steps necessary to identify, evaluate, select, and ultimately agree to share the cost of beneficial interregional transmission projects so they can move forward in their development. And then addressing this gap is a key priority of the action plan and the reason that we're all here today. The plan set out 2 immediate near-term steps for states to take to fill this void in interregional planning and pursue these available cost-saving opportunities for customers. First, the plan recommended that the collaborative take the leading role in identifying candidate interregional project designs. This recommendation includes, as the states have done, taking the lead to develop a pathway outside the existing process by issuing a request for information, seeking project designs that could satisfy identified low regrets needs. The action plan also recommended that the RFI could focus on projects that are relatively less complex to develop, such as projects that may have already accomplished some of the necessary initial development milestones, or projects that simultaneously address refurbishment needs of aging existing infrastructure while expanding into regional transfer capability, or grid enhancing technologies. I think all of these kind of go in the category of low hanging fruit with relatively less development effort required. As seen on the slide, we do note that the ISO RTOs will need to be key partners and advisors to the states in the RFI effort, as any selected project would ultimately need to be integrated into more than one regional transmission plan across the various regions. And then briefly, for any project identified through the RFI to ultimately be pursued, states would need to agree on the allocation of interregional project costs. While I won't dwell on that, ultimately we feel a workable and durable cost allocation approach would be sufficiently flexible to adapt to various types of transmission projects while not being overly restrictive or formulaic. So with that, I would note that the full strategic action plan, including a full review of the studies kind of supporting the low regrets needs, are available on the JHU website with the collaborative. So Abe, thanks again for the opportunity, and I'll send it back to you.
Great, great. So just as a reminder, if you do have any questions as we're going, please feel free to use the chat feature. But let me walk through exactly what we're going to talk about today. So one thing I wanted to let everyone know is that we recognize that there's going to be a lot of questions from potential participants in the RFI, and we wanted to create a formal process for collecting those questions and providing feedback. So there will be an FAQ document that we will post on the website, and then we'll get updated as new questions come in. I will note we also have an FAQ for consultants who are potentially participating in the collaborative's hiring of a consultant to support the back end of the analysis and the conduct of the RFI. And there's a link to that here, and you can see it. And we'll be using a very similar format for the FAQ for potential participants in the RFI. Sorry, that probably said that in a confusing manner, but we're very interested in collecting those questions and disseminating them in as public and transparent a way as we can. So Joe, next slide, please. So what are we talking about here? We're really talking about trying to take this whole interregional transmission planning process that has largely been the province of sort of generic studies looking at interregional transfer capability benefits and convert it into something that's a little bit more tangible. And the way we have been talking about that is we are looking to identify candidate projects. Candidate projects are ones, that it says here on the left, that can cost effectively enhance grid reliability and resilience, improve market efficiency, advance achievement of state clean energy requirements and goals, and very importantly, reduce costs for consumers. And you can see as you look through both the cover letter from the states as well as the text of the document, we're really laser focused on projects that we can bring forward, that meet the requirements. So what are those requirements? That's what we lay out here. This is all text from the RFI. So if you want to read more about it, please go ahead. You can actually read the actual document as well. So candidate projects should identify opportunities between at least two of the three control areas operated in the Northeast. That's very important to what we're talking about here. Candidate projects can be proposed by any interested entity. And we listed a few, but that's not meant to be exclusive. We really welcome thinking and participation from the whole spectrum of the energy ecosystem. Three is the focus of the RFI is really on that 2035 timeframe. But of course, obviously, there is nothing magical about 2035, and we are very open to considering projects that may have a more immediate implementation schedule, as well as those that may take longer. But we're thinking about things, that can be implemented in, and in service within the next 10 years. So one update I wanted to provide, we've received a number of questions about how Canadian provinces would work within this and how transmission projects across the US-Canadian border would be treated. We recognize that there has been a bunch of very exciting activity in that space in the last few months, and we wanted to be clarified that we will welcome international projects so long as they enhance the interregional transfer capability between two or more ISOs in the United States. But we wanted to be as open as possible as we could to that. And the other update we've provided is candidate projects are not required to be physically located in states participating in the collaborative. Obviously, we have 9 states participating in the collaborative, but it could very well be that a piece of low-hanging fruit transmission upgrade could be, say, between Pennsylvania and New York. Just to pick one totally at random, Pennsylvania obviously is not a participant in the collaborative, that would be responsive to the RFI. So we just wanted to clarify that in response to some questions we've gotten. All right, Joe, next slide. So one of the things we talk about a lot is, what is the nature of the candidate projects we're going to get? One thing we are very interested in is opportunistic grid enhancements, which, those of you who know John Berniker, he loves to talk about low-hanging fruit. Really, that is our low-hanging fruit category, where projects, can come in, where we're seeing things on the grid that there's an opportunity to take advantage of some limiting element that can be fixed relatively cheaply, and we're very interested in those projects. We're also very interested in larger scale interregional ties, and that also is very exciting to us. And the way we have couched this RFI is we are really looking across the full spectrum of potential interregional upgrades. So we're very open to hearing from developers really up and down the size and scope. And as I say down below, we're very open to a variety of different project maturity, size, and complexity levels. And we're interested in small projects and we're interested in large projects. Now, given where we are in the process, we are, sorry, Joe, next slide, please. So as we go through and think about this, we're talking about the technical description. There is a lot of information in the RFI. I'm not going to read it all, and nor is this intended as a summary of everything in the RFI. But these are the types of things we're going to be looking for. We're interested in understanding what the project is, what the technology is, what are the reasonably foreseeable supply chain, labor, and materials issues. As well as a list of any studies that we may have seen, that you may have already produced or conducted, or that the ISOs have done, that would help us evaluate the project. All right, Joe, next, please. So let's talk a little bit about the submittal process. We are asking for submittals by October 23rd, 2025. We will be providing additional information about the logistics of those submittals as we get closer to that date. But it's important to recognize that these, by the way, can I just get a sound check? Can folks hear me okay?
You sound good, Abe.
Okay, great. So it's important to recognize that the initial concept papers were really looking for 12 pages as the page limit. So we recognize, we are not looking for 1,000-page submittals at this point. Really, we're looking for enough information to conduct a high-level scoping analysis to identify which projects seem the most promising and might get passed through to a future process. We talk about a couple of those things here, and we ask for respondents to provide up to 1 page on their experience in transmission development. Just looking around the room here, I know there are a number of people who could fill up, 50 pages with their transmission development experience, but we're going to ask you to keep that relatively short. And as I mentioned, we will be asking folks to submit proposals in a standard format. Next. So the evaluation process, obviously, this is really critical. We are looking to conduct our initial high-level scoping analysis in Q1, Q2, 2026. Obviously, depending on the number of proposals we get and their complexity, that may slip or may advance. But we're really trying to come back to folks relatively quickly with our sort of initial analysis. So we are also going to hire a consultant to help us with the engineering feasibility analysis, as well as to help run the process. And we are going to be actively seeking assistance from entities outside of the collaborative, including the ISOs and RTOs themselves, DOE, FERC, NERC, national labs, other entities of that sort who may be able to help us with the technical analysis and who are really critical to turning this into something that is actionable. Scoring will be scoring will be conducted on a holistic basis according to the criteria that we have set forth in the RFI. And we'll walk through exactly what some of those criteria are on the next slide, Joe. So again, I'm not going to read this, and this is just an excerpt from the larger RFI, but key considerations. We're really looking for that impact and market viability. So affordability, how does it enhance regional or interregional system reliability? How do we leverage use of existing rights of way, reduce environmental impacts, grid reliability and resilience, as well as innovative approaches. These are all things, and they're spelled out in some detail in the RFI, that we're going to be using as our scoring rubric as we analyze the project submittals. And then on the next slide, you'll see we also have another set of key considerations. Joe, thank you. Project plan and feasibility. And we're really looking to see how these projects contribute to the goals that the collaborative and its states have set forth, offer a public benefit. We're very interested in things that have a clear path to replication or scale, and as well as maximize energy, market, and resource adequacy benefits. Because I don't need to tell anybody on this call, affordability is a key consideration for many, many states. And we really do see these interregional transmission ties as a means of enhancing both reliability and affordability. We're also interested in ideas for various funding opportunities, recognizing that the federal landscape may not be optimal at the moment for all types of new transmission, but there is also some out there. And particularly, in collaboration with the administration's energy dominance agenda, a lot of these transmission projects feel like they would fit in very nicely into that type of agenda, as we think really about how do we improve reliability, get things like data centers connected faster, and all of the other economic development goals that the United States has. Okay, next slide, please, Joe. So one thing we recognize is that the confidentiality of submittals is of paramount interest to a number of our development partners. And we're interested in working with developers to make this process as successful as we possibly can. And that means being very responsive and recognizing that there are legitimate confidentiality issues out there, and to work with you to the extent we can, consistent with the requirements of 9 states and the Freedom of Information laws in each state. So we're going to ask respondents to provide both confidential and public-facing versions of their applications. The redacted versions can be submitted, I believe it's 2 weeks after the initial submittals are made. And we'll make sure to redact any things associated with confidential energy information, infrastructure information, CEII, if applicable. And just one note on that, given the relatively short nature of these initial concept papers, we're not necessarily anticipating that there will be a lot of CEII or other sort of highly confidential grid security information, but we want to recognize that that may be part of it. So if the respondents do not submit a redacted version, then we will treat the submittal as confidential. Now, we anticipate that this is very important for projects that are not selected for further development by the collaborative. We're going to do our best to keep those projects confidential, because we recognize that a number of very meritorious projects may not be selected for further consideration, but we still want to make sure that those projects have a path to development. And so we're going to keep those. We do not intend to publicly release those, again, consistent with applicable state law. And Joe, I think we have a couple other notes on confidentiality. These are questions that we've already received. I'm not going to read it, but you can see it here. How will the collaborative and its agents address confidentiality of concepts submitted into the RFI? And we're going to keep the projects that are not selected out of the public domain to the extent we can. And then for projects that are moved forward to the next round, we're going to do our best to make sure that those projects are only put out in a redacted form. We've also received questions about whether the collaborative is looking to take projects and put them out for bid. where a developer comes in and identifies a really great line between points A and B. Are we going to take that project and simply put it out for bid to the lowest cost respondent? And while I want to make it clear, we don't necessarily have a clear path under current existing ISO RTO rules. That is not our intent. We do not intend to take projects, take the intellectual property of bidders, and then put it out for bid in that way. To the extent that a competitive process is required by FERC rules or by ISO RTOs, we anticipate that if we got a project that seemed like it was a promising one, we would think about identifying a genericized transmission need that would be appropriate to include in the applicable transmission planning process. Then proposers would be encouraged to take that intellectual property, that idea, and submit the candidate project as a means of meeting that transmission need. We think that is a reasonable way of bridging the sort of conflict between wanting to respect developer confidentiality, but also recognizing that at some point we are likely to have to go through a competitive process for some types of projects. So Joe, next slide, please. By the way, as we have this discussion, we really are interested in getting feedback from project developers about these confidentiality rules and making sure that we do this in a way that is both consistent with state law as well as recognizes the commercial sensitivities of our development partners. So I also want to turn to a little bit and talk about next steps. And again, I'm not going to read this whole thing. But we're really looking to clearly identify the benefits. We often talk about in our meetings, benefits allocation is a lot easier discussion than a cost allocation discussion. And I think a lot of times we all get hung up on talking about the costs while really ignoring the benefits. And if the benefits of these projects are as compelling as we think they are, and what all the research suggests that they are, we want to make sure that we're really clearly talking about those benefits, in addition to obviously talking about the costs. So we, as we come out of this process, the member states, envision, and again, we've got to figure out these rules. Part of the reason for this RFI is that we recognize that the ISO RTO rules are not well developed for interregional projects. But we would propose to work with project sponsors really closely to move these things forward, as well as existing transmission owners, our ISOs, RTOs, and other interested parties. We recognize that there will have to be a cost allocation framework for any types of project. And we are going to commit to working on that in parallel with identifying the candidate projects. But again, we think it's really important that we take these things out of the abstract and make it as concrete as possible so that when we get to the cost allocation discussions, there is benefits to look at as well. And again, we're going to really take this RFI and use it to try to really better understand the process and recognize that there's a number of potential funding mechanisms, and we would commit to working with our state partners to come up with an equitable way of allocating any costs. Next slide, please, Joe. So this is a really key question, and I recognize a lot of people want to know, is this a real solicitation? Are you all serious about this? Where's the follow-up? And while we don't have, I want to be clear, we don't necessarily have a path that's well trodden for this kind of project. We are very excited, and our state partners are very excited in figuring that out. So we're going to look and really work both with FERC and the ISOs and RTOs and other interested stakeholders to develop a workable progress for advancing these types of projects. And we think that once we have identified a path and we've ran through it once or twice, it will simply make future efforts a lot easier. And so that is key to what we're trying to do here. All right, next slide, please, Joe. Oh, that's it. So I see there's at least one question in the chat. We'll turn to that. And I really appreciate everyone's participation today. So one question we had is, would the candidate project be automatically disqualified or placed at a disadvantage if it connects only one of the Atlantic provinces in Canada with only one of the 3 participating ISOs? That's a great question. That's probably one that is worth a more detailed answer. We'll certainly report it. I think the goal is to, at the end of the day, increase interregional transfer capability between the three ISOs in the United States. So to the extent that a project, comes in from Canada and increases the throughput on the American side as well, then absolutely that project would be considered. And I think there's probably more details there that need to be worked through, but we do want to be very responsive to our concerns from projects originating in Canada. Second question I see here is can more than one initial concept paper be submitted to respondents to the RFI? Do proposed solutions need to be in one concept paper, or could each proposed solution be its own? Yeah, absolutely. We can have more than one. If you have separate projects, then yes, they should be submitted separately, and I would actually discourage you from submitting them as one package. Obviously, if we see people proposing the same project to try to circumvent the page limit, that would be a sort of a different conversation. But no, I think it's actually best that each individual project come and be on a standalone basis. Maybe Sue or Joe, do you want to help me with some of the questions? We're getting a number of questions now.
All right, so yeah, we're going a little quick. Let me page back up here. How do you anticipate running the competitive solicitation process between two RTOs, such as between PJM and New York ISO, if they don't have that current mechanism? And this is a point that Abe did touch on. And yes, we do recognize that the processes today are not really designed for this, and which is largely why the states are leading this effort. And so in a parallel effort based on the proposals or the concepts that are received, then we would work with those RTOs that would be impacted to determine what processes, how it would fit within the existing process, or if there might need to be some adjustments in order to move these projects forward if we believe that they are beneficial to the region. All right,
Great. And Joe, we did get a question. Is there any limit on appendices or total pages, including appendices? What level of detail is required for technical items like physical location, equipment, cost estimate, and project schedule? That is a great question. And we do answer that question in the RFI. I want to make sure that I don't freelance what the answer is. I'd have to look and see exactly what it is, but we did try to be really clear about that. And I think your question gets at a really good point, which is what's the level of maturity and detail that we're looking for in these initial concept papers? And the answer is we really are looking for relatively high-level projects. And in some cases, it may be a real concept that hasn't been developed. In other cases, it may be a project supported by, 1,000 pages of studies that have already been completed. And really what we're looking for is that high level of summary of the projects that we can then work with the states and the individual developer to get through. So we're really accepting projects from any number of levels of maturity. And I think we are, I think the answer is we have a rule around you can put in links or other things to the 12 pages, but I think we are, as I remember, I think we clarified that we're not looking for large additional attachments. However, as we go through the process and start doing the evaluation, we very much expect that we will come back and have discussions with developers, and to the extent that we have questions about the materials and more detail, we will ask those questions as part of the process.
Thanks for catching that question that I inadvertently skipped over. Yeah, they did start coming through quite quickly. All right, let's keep going there. So we talked about Ross's question and Shadab's question, and next I see Selena has a question about projects that, to the extent that there is a developer A working with another developer where it spans two different states, and the question is, should proposing a section In state B, should the two concept papers be submitted for the solution, one for part A and one for part B? I don't think we explicitly would rule one or the other out. I'm going to answer this one on the fly. I think we would prefer that if the two solutions work together, that they be part of a single concept paper. If that's not possible, I think certainly we could be flexible, but to the extent that it would make it easier for us to work and to evaluate and understand the total benefits, particularly if they're interdependent or dependent on each component being done.
Yeah, and we do anticipate that there will be a number of projects that may be teaming arrangements between more than one developer. And we certainly welcome that and expect that. So let me get to Stephen's question here. Would you be open to receiving alternative proposals for a given solution? For example, one baseline project and one using advanced transmission technologies. And if so, would that be one concept paper or two? The first half of your question is an easy yes. We would certainly be open to that. I think we will probably take that back and provide you a written answer. My initial gut reaction is that it would be two, as long as there's not a dependency between the two. Whereas if it's a project and then an add-on for ATIs, I think it would probably be one. But we're happy to take that back and provide some additional guidance. And I will also say that as people get through this process, as I mentioned, I expect there will be additional questions that come out. So don't think of this as the last opportunity to ask questions, and we will keep that FAQ updated as we get new questions in. Ross, do you want to come on off mute for a second and ask your question? I'm not quite sure we follow.
Sure, thank you. My question is really around whether there are types of activities that you could say now would definitely be excluded from the collaborative's activities in next steps with selected projects, or other activities that you think you would definitely be engaged in.
I don't think we have any categorical exclusions. We really want to be as creative as we possibly can here. I'm not sure if you have something specific you have in mind, and we're happy to take that offline if that would be easier, because we don't want to necessarily get into the details. But we're pretty open. I mean, really, we are looking at innovative and creative approaches here to a challenge that, frankly, has bedeviled many of us for a lot of years. And so we are very interested in creative thinking on ways to increase interregional transfer capability. So, I don't know if that answers your question or not, but we're taking deliberately a pretty broad brush approach.
That answers it. Thank you very much.
Okay, great. Okay, next question we have was when the process moves to working with the ISOs or RTOs, how does the developer have assurance that the developer will have the right to develop the project if it successfully moves through the public RTO process? When you said you want to propose a generic version of the developer's project to the RTO. Yeah, this is really important, and we've talked about this quite a bit. So here's how we're currently thinking about it. So generally, we expect that there will be a competitive requirement in a lot of the ISO rules and the FERC rules for interregional transmission. But that's not necessarily true for every project. There are certainly projects that are exempt from competition where there is a reconductoring of an existing utility line that's entirely within the utility's right of way. So we don't have like clear exclusions on which type of projects are able to participate, or which ones will have to go through competition or which ones won't. But what we wanted to be clear about is that where projects can move forward quickly, we're excited about that, and could conceivably end up with a process that doesn't involve competition if it is within, say, an existing utility right-of-way. But if the ISO RTO rules are such that they require a competitive process, then what we would try to do is, we wouldn't say, okay, we have a proposal to put a line from substation A to substation B, crossing an interface, creating interregional transfer capability. Now we want a bidder to come up with the least cost version of that particular transmission line. Instead, what we'd be more likely to do is to say, hey, we are looking to create, 500 or 1,000 megawatts of new transfer capability across this interface, and then allow projects to come in and participate to propose various solutions to that. Now, I want to really emphasize the rules on this stuff are incredibly unclear. And one of the goals that we have here is to help figure those things out. And we've talked to the ISOs, RTOs, and I think we all recognize that there's a couple different paths that these projects could take through the planning processes. And so we're hoping that we will be able to work with you and with them and with FERC to come up with a process that has a good combination of really respecting the intellectual property of the developers. Sue, do you want to chime in on that one?
Sorry. So next question. Are you talking about the last question or the next one? I'm already looking at the next one.
I wasn't sure if you had anything to add to the last question, but if not, go ahead to the next one.
Yeah, no. I'll just reiterate again. There are certainly clear FERC regulations that apply to each of the RTO regions. They have tariffs that will have to be respected to the extent that there are any state aspects of that regulatory framework. So we do have to work within that. But again, to the extent that we can also work with the regional grid planners to help move these projects forward that we see are beneficial, that's what we will do. But all in all, we will have to respect what the rules are that are in place.
Hey, can I follow up on that? That was my question.
Please.
That's helpful. I guess I still want to understand a little better, because what I heard you say was, if a concept paper is proposed, you guys like the idea, you're going to take that to the ISO and the RTOs and kind of genericize it so that you're saying, okay, from here to here, we think we can get X amount of megawatts. I guess what I'm trying to figure out, though, if a developer has come to you with that idea and that's their intellectual property, and then you're opening it up to the whole universe to then put in new bids on that, I guess how is the developers' confidentiality there, assured, and that their idea, they have the right to be able to develop that idea, and not somebody else swoop in and take it at the back end of this process.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is where it's very difficult to answer these kinds of questions in the abstract, because the ISO RTO rules are really not that clear. And even where we're looking at intra-regional, so within ISO planning processes, the answer to that question is going to differ based on which region you're in and what kind of project it is. In PJM, we have the sponsorship model. And so generally, for example, when New Jersey went out with its state agreement approach, it said that the goal was to interconnect, X number of new megawatts of offshore wind, and then we took bids from various developers on the best way to do that. The rules are different, up in New York and New England as well. But a lot of them have that kind of concept embedded somewhere in the process. And while there is an opportunity, I think for the collaborative and for the ISOs to work together and potentially put into place new processes, a lot of the ISOs, RTOs, and sort of longstanding FERC policy has been that some types of projects, there is a competitive element. And so, I think what we can commit to is again, if you're looking across an ISO interface, we would most likely, we're going to say, not put out, hey, we think we can loop substation A with substation B and do a particular upgrade there. That is, I think the thing that you would bring to the table. But what we can say is, in a really generic basis, we are looking for projects that increase the throughput across the interface, at which point you would be competing with a number of other potential projects to satisfy that genericized need. But it would not be the case that we are saying, okay, we're looking for, a particular substation here of a particular technology, of a particular size, and we're just looking for the lowest cost bidder. I don't know if that totally answers your question, but that's how we're thinking about it. And we are really trying to situate ourselves within the existing universe of FERC precedent on this issue, while still respecting the, as you say, the intellectual property of the developers.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's
and
very
Abe,
helpful. Thank you.
sorry about that, Dylan. I just want to add maybe two other thoughts to this, and there are also ROFR rules, right of first refusal, that will apply. We do also have to respect those. So even if you have that unique concept, but it would conflict with a utility's right to construct on its own property facilities, then we would have to accommodate that. Also, I want to note that with this RFI, we really are opening it to any submittal of concepts. And so that might include entities that are not developers, but do submit a really unique concept, in which case they would not be in a position to build that project. But we do, want to bring that out and open that out up to development. And so that's another potential avenue where, yes, we understand about the intellectual property, but the entity proposing it may not have any interest in actually developing the project themselves.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
So let's keep moving down the list here. Will there be opportunities to present proposals to the collaborative after the October submittal? Listen, I would love for this to become a regular process, but I think we'll have to wait and see how round one goes. But I think, yes, I mean, many of our states are regularly looking at transmission, potential transmission projects, and I'm sure that they will remain interested. We will try to respect, for this particular process, we will try to respect that October 23rd deadline. And we'll ask submittals that come in after that, suggest that they defer to the next round. But of course, I mean, listen, we would love to create a process for interregional transmission planning that works and have a regular cycle where developers can come in and present their ideas. I think that would be a wonderful thing to come out of this.
Abe, if I could add to that if we do have questions about a proposal that is very promising, we may schedule some follow-up with that submitter or multiple submitters just to get clarification, or if that's a project that we feel is worth moving forward with. So we would have that opportunity to pursue further and get that clarification.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's right. To the extent that people are bringing, projects, we absolutely expect that there will be a dialogue with the states and with our evaluation process. So yes, thank you for that clarification. So next question, will the collaborative publish cost estimate expectations and framework to facilitate meaningful comparison across the various proposals? How will cost estimates be used? Recognizing the cost will be highly conceptual. Yeah, I think that's where, and it's important to note that at the end of the day, this is not an RFP where the states are going to, select a particular proposal and say, yes, let's build that. It almost certainly this will be our screening process to have a second round process where we get into some of the more detailed cost estimates. Because, that's obviously not going to happen in 12 pages. And it's premature at this time. But yes, we would expect that we will be having discussions internally about how we evaluate cost benefits analyses across a whole bunch of different projects. That's obviously a very important issue. Has the collaborative discussed any cost allocation principles? Yeah, we have. And if you take a look at the strategic action plan, one of the major deliverables is to have discussions about cost allocation. One of the things that I feel very strongly, and I think a lot of us do, is that cost allocation in the abstract has proven to be a road to nowhere. And so one of the reasons we're doing things in this order is we want to have specific candidate projects where we can see costs and benefits and really talk about what are, really focus on what those benefits are. And then go, as I often say to folks, if you go to your governor and say, hey, we have $1 billion of benefits to split between two states, that's a much easier conversation than if you go and say we have $1 billion of costs to split between two states. And I think in a lot of cases, that has been what has hung up some of these more generic cost allocation discussions. So it is absolutely a high priority item for us, but we also want to make sure that we're doing it in the right order. Let me invite my colleagues, Hannes, Joe, if you all have any comments or things that you think we haven't hit on today, please feel free to chime in. And then we'll go ahead and open it up for any last questions. All right, wonderful. I'm not hearing any. You all have my email and Sue's email. We're incredibly excited about this whole process, and we really look forward to working with each of you because we think this is a really unique opportunity to move interregional transmission planning forward. So with that, I see we have one additional question. There are potential policy levers states could pull to advance beneficial projects, i.e. providing voluntary funding. If the info is all confidential, how can states try to advance beneficial projects? Yeah, that's a great question. And we will be answering that a little bit more detail in the FAQ we're going to put out. But the basic idea is that we recognize for projects that we don't elect to move forward through this process, our hope is that those projects will remain entirely confidential. For projects that we would like to advance and develop further, there will be additional discussions about how to present those projects to the public and to the ISOs for further review. And we want to make sure that we are, working with those developers to respect their intellectual property while also recognizing that at some point you need to come off of stealth mode and actually put that project out there for people to review in some format. So the idea is that we will have additional discussions about that second group of projects. Hopefully that's clear. All right, wonderful. We won't keep people any longer. Thank you all very much for participating. Do feel free to follow up with us if you have any questions, and we're really excited to be working with you. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.